Today on the DML News podcast, we're going to do a recap of Pete Hegseth's very contentious Senate hearing yesterday. We're also going to talk about the upcoming hearings. We're going to talk a little bit about what's going on with the drones and the mystery drones and an update as to their origin. And we're also going to discuss what happens when you let the migrants in, but they decide not to leave. We have this and more, and it's all unfiltered.
Dennis Michael Lynch gives you his word, and he will never let you down. He will always fight for America.
The only one who really puts his money where his mouth is Dennis Michael Lynch.
Hey everybody, it's Denny here with Ryan on the controls, and he's got a microphone as well. And like I mentioned in the intro, we're going to probably just jump right into it because this show or produce plenty of soundbite worthy clips yesterday. Pete Hegseth, the former Fox News host and a great guy who served our country, sat before the Senate Arms Committee, and let's just say I'm probably going to guess what he had to bear through yesterday was tougher than anything he's ever had to do during his time in service. Simply because even though he was asked legitimate questions, primarily by Republican senators, which we'll kind of more get to towards the end of this segment, a lot of the more ridiculous questions, or I should just say accusations and maybe even more so declarations, came from the Democrats, particularly the women Democrats. Say what you want about Pete Hegseth. I mean, I would actually probably venture to say there would be other people I would choose for the role of Secretary of Defense over Pete Hegseth. At the same time, though, if this is Trump's pick and this is who he thinks is best to lead, and based on what I have seen, I think it would be a correct choice to put him there in terms of comparisons on who's already serving the role as well as in that department. I mean, this is coming off of the Biden administration, who I'm pretty sure is hiring transgenders and then people who don't know their own identity and end up stealing, luggage and handbags. Or they have someone fill the role who then gets an emergency surgery. It doesn't even inform his commander-in-chief that he's getting the surgery. One thing that I definitely came away with in this hearing is that Hegseth definitely has a loyalty and a dedication to the Trump agenda. And that is probably why he pissed off a lot of Democrats yesterday. For example, we got Kristen Gillibrand from New York, who at this point, ever since she filled that role of senator from Hillary Clinton, because let's not forget, she got that position initially because Hillary Clinton was to serve as Secretary of State under Obama. It's way past due her time to get her out of there because all she does is bloviate. We also have Tammy Duckworth, and by all means, respect her for serving our country. But you can also kind of tell that her line of questioning was more so, how can I just be a showman and attack Pete Hegseth at all angles? And that's kind of what this turned into, just attacks. So Ryan's going to play back-to-back here, Gillibrand and Duckworth, quote-unquote, questioning Hegseth.
In the DOD, everything you've said in these public statements is politics. I don't want women. I don't want moms. What's wrong with a mom, by the way? Once you have babies, you therefore are no longer able to be lethal. I mean, you're basically saying women after they have children can't ever serve in the military in a combat role. It's a silly thing to say. It's a silly thing to say beneath the position that you are aspiring to. To denigrate LGBTQ service members is a mistake. If you are a sharpshooter, you're as lethal regardless of what your gender identity is, regardless of who you love. So please know this to be a true statement. So you say it was a political thing. You say it undermined us, social engineering. I don't know why someone having to publicly say or not publicly say who they love is social engineering. I think.
Have you led an audit of any organization? Yes or no? I don't want a long answer. Yes or no? Have you led an audit of any organization of which you were in charge?
Senator, in both of the organizations I ran, we were always completely fiscally responsible.
Yes or no? Did you lead an audit?
And the way
yes or no? Did you lead an audit?
Stated,
yes or no?
Completely
what are you afraid of? You can't answer this question. Yes or no? Did you lead an audit? Do you not know this answer?
Senator,
yes
every part of my leadership of these organizations
yes
has
or
been
no,
misrepresented.
I will take that as a no. What were the findings? So there were no findings because you've never led an audit. What guidance did you give the auditors? None, because you've never led an audit. Nobody expects you to be an accountant, Mr. Hegseth. What we expect is for you to understand the complexity of this Pentagon budget process that is absolutely necessary to outfit our war fighters.
Now, what's ridiculous by their line of questioning is that if you look at Pete Hegseth's statements, he's more so going on the about face of we should have the best serving our combat roles. He's not necessarily saying that we need to take women out of service. I mean, I know plenty of women who have actually served our country, and they did so, patriotically and dutifully. But what they're trying to spin here is that Hegseth is coming off as misogynistic, and then Gillibrand with her tactic there of trying to label him as anti-LGBTQ. Trump was pretty notorious for putting the transgender ban in the military, and it's a decision that I happen to agree with because, again, Democrats want to kind of play the shuffling cards on, okay, transgenderism is a mental illness and probably incapacitates your ability to actually serve if you're that mentally ill about your own identity, but yet we're supposed to like pedestal and respect them to no end. So they really just, are always kind of changing the goalposts, and you can't blame Hegseth for that. And props to him for standing his own against those two. But then you have your very geriatric senators who we're going to get into here, such as Elizabeth Warren, someone who I think personally is a scammer and a disservice to Massachusetts, and yet she is also someone who continues to get elected. Well, Elizabeth Warren definitely proved herself to be a bit of a clown yesterday by confusing Pete Hegseth as a U.S. general. Riley, let's play that clip.
In other words, you're quite sure that every general who serves should not go directly into the defense industry for 10 years. You're not willing to make that same pledge?
I'm not a general, Senator.
You'll be the one, let us just be clear, in charge of the generals.
But it only really kind of gets worse from here. Someone who I think must be on the lowest of the IQ scale when it comes to that committee alone has to be Hawaii Senator Mazie Hirono, who we have back-to-back clips here, tries to attack Hegseth as someone who's going to carry out Trump's orders to invade Greenland with military force, even though he makes no such declaration, and then also tries to charge Hegseth with the accusations that he's an excessive alcoholic and a drinker. And what I find ironic, and I'll take Ryan's take on this too, because we were watching the clip, is that she'll make this charge, and yet she herself almost sounds like maybe she was cocktailing before stepping into that committee hearing. So Ryan's going to play those back-to-back clips.
Would you use our military to take over Greenland or an ally of Denmark?
Senator, one of the things that President Trump is so good at is never strategically tipping his hand. And so I would never in this public forum give one way or another direct what orders the president would give me in any context.
That sounds to me that you would contemplate carrying out such an order to basically invade Greenland and take over the Panama Canal. By enforcing the Uniform Code of Military Justice, UCMJ, in addition to the sexual assault allegations, and by the way, the answer to my second question should have been yes. I have read multiple reports of your regularly being drunk at work, including by people who worked with you at Fox News. Do you know that being drunk at work is prohibited for service members under the UCMJ?
Senator, those
Yes
are
or no?
multiple false anonymous reports peddled by NBC
Do you
News
know
that
that
run directly
drinking on the job
contradictory to
is
the dozens of men and women at
not
Fox News
contemplated?
Channel
And
who
I'm not
I work
hearing-
with
I'm
who
not
came
hearing
on
the
the
answer to my
record
question.
and said they've
In your
never
opening
seen
statement,
that.
Mr. Hegseth, you commit to holding leaders accountable at all levels. That includes you, of course.
Now, what's interesting is that I don't actually have this clip today, but Mark Wayne Mullen, who was part of that committee too, eventually brought up the fact that all these Democrats are attacking, Pete Hegseth over some of these accusations. Even mentions the drinking, and he kind of charges the Democrats. How many of you have actually shown up to some of our meetings a little bit, half in the wind? And you could kind of see by the silence in that in that accusation that no one's perfect. He also brings up technically about the accusations of Hegseth's personal life with his infidelity. In fact, Tim Kaine, of all freaking people, is the one who kind of makes a very targeted attack about that, and even tries to invoke Pete Hegseth's daughter into this situation. So Ryan's going to play the clip here of Tim Kaine coming after Pete Hegseth.
Completely cleared. Can you so casually cheat on a second wife and cheat on the mother of a child that had been born 2 months before, and you tell us you are completely cleared? How is that a complete clear?
Senator, her child's name is Gwendolyn Hope Hegseth, and she's a child of God, and she's 7 years old.
And she was, and you cheated on the mother of that child less than 2 months after that daughter was born, didn't you?
Those were false charges.
Well,
it was fully investigated, and I was completely clear.
Now, what I find ironic is that Kaine is going to grandstand and have so much dignity about being faithful to one's spouse, wife or husband, which Mark Wayne Mullen also mentioned about how Democrats have their own issues in that regard. And yet Kaine was the running mate to Hillary Clinton. I mean, she and Bill are the almost Pictionary definition of presidential or, position of authority infidelity. And he's going to come at it as like he's holier than thou and can't accept Pete Hegseth to be in the role. At the end of the day, it matters more about the person's ability to serve the role he's anointed or nominated to, not necessarily about his background. I mean, yes, if he is a troubled gambler and an avid alcoholic and incapable of this and that, then that's going to impact the job. But think about at this point just how many people we have in office that have had some kind of infidelity cheating scandal. I mean, I don't agree with Pete Hegseth's decision there by any means, and I wouldn't want him to maybe be the husband to a theoretical daughter or sister kind of situation. But if Hegseth has the qualifications to lead a department that Trump and his team vetted him for and said, you know what, this is the man that can really lead the pack here. I mean, that's what we should base it off of. So in that regard, there is a clip here we have of Senator Tim Sheehy from Montana, and he kind of makes a very good case here. It's about 2.5 minutes long, where he kind of goes over that it's more about the qualifications of the person filling the role and maybe someone who's in that department that others can look up to. And he kind of lays it out that Hegseth kind of relates to your rifleman more so than a career general. So Ryan's going to play that clip for you. I think it's quite powerful.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pete, I'm actually going to ask you questions because I want to hear your answer. How many genders are there? Tough one.
Senator, there are 2 genders.
I know that well. I'm a Sheehy, so I'm on board. What is the diameter of the rifle round fired out of an M4A1 rifle?
That's a 5.56.
How many push-ups can you do?
I did 5 sets of 47 this morning.
What do you think are most important strategic bases in the Pacific?
In the Pacific, Guam is pretty strategically significant.
How many rounds of 5.56 can you fit into the magazine of an M4 rifle?
Depends on the magazine, but standard issue is 30. Senator.
And what size round does the M9 Beretta standard issue sidearm for the military fire?
A 9mm, Senator.
What kind of batteries do you put in your night vision goggle?
Duracell.
So right there, you're representing qualifications that show you understand what the warfighter deals with every single day on the battlefield. You understand what happens on the front line, where our troops will be. And what happens, unfortunately, in this country is decisions made in rooms like this, bad decisions, end up in dead 17, 18, 19-year-old Americans. And those Americans rarely come from families that sit in rooms like this. They come from lower, middle-income families who sometimes the military is their only way out. And they join because maybe they want to go to college. Maybe they had no other choice. Maybe they love this country. But for whatever reason, they joined and they sat on the dotted line. And when people like us screw up, they don't come home. And that's the one thing that I care about. As you remember when I shut the door, when you came with your entourage, Senator Coleman, I've known for a long time. and you and I sat together, asked you one question. You remember what that question was?
Are you going to have the backs of the war fighters?
Exactly. What is going to be your number one priority? And I don't care, frankly, what all these letters and articles say. I've been a part of a smear campaign too. I get it. I care that you're going to have one thing in mind when you sit in that chair in that 5-sided building. And you told me what that was. So with that, you have my support. I'm sorry you have to go through a process like this.
Very powerful indeed. And you got to give Pete Hegseth the chops for at least sitting through that hearing with all those Democrats, like Sheehy said. I mean, here's a little meme compilation video that we found on X that I think really defines how yesterday must have felt for Mr. Hegseth.
Yes, veterans organizations that will help our veterans get every damn thing that they deserve because they signed on the dotted line.
So all in all, I think whether you are a Hegseth fan or not, because I would have to say that out of Trump's nominations the second time around, I remember the first time when he did Rex Tillerson, that was a little bit controversial. There was actually probably more controversial picks on his first go around, and then in some of these second term picks. But Hegseth is definitely up there as one of the more unconventional. And I would have to say, based on that hearing alone, I would definitely feel okay with him fulfilling that role. Like I said earlier, maybe not my first pick, but at the same time, that hearing really kind of showed yesterday that Democrats have not learned anything from their devastating election losses back in November, because rather than asking questions that maybe would be a little bit beneficial to understanding where Hegseth falls short, they kind of just spent, as they usually do, their time on on his personal life, and they just grandstanded. So, Ryan, before we wrap up here with a recap on Hegseth's confirmation, I just wanted to get your overall take based on what you saw yesterday, how you felt Hegseth did, but just basically the acts that or I should say the display of actions that the Democrats displayed yesterday.
It's just a classic smear campaign. He rolled with the punches. He delivered punches. I love that Warren video where she calls him out or says that he's a general. He's like, I'm not. Just makes them look stupid. But the drinking thing, that's total like a scandal and lies. And I mean, look at Kamala Harris. Half the time she looked like she was, 2 sheets to the wind while giving a rally or whatnot. And we've seen some videos come out, especially the one when I think she was in Hawaii. She looked like she took a Xanax and put down some martinis. And then again with the, cheating on your wife. When it comes to the job that he's supposed to be doing, I don't see how that really correlates to performing it. So, I mean, they can sit there and do that all you want, but what really matters is like, I forget his name. What was he's asking about in 556?
Oh, Sheehy.
Sheehy. What Sheehy did is, what really should be the questions. It should be, are you capable?
Yes.
And then her being like, have you ever done an audit? Have you ever done an audit? So, the 2 organizations he ran never needed to be audited.
Right.
And that's how it should be. The government shouldn't be efficient enough to where it's not audited.
Yes.
So, yeah, he held his own. I'm kind of excited to see what he does. Anyone is better than who we have in there right now.
Yes.
And,
which is, I think,
it's up to him to ruin. So everyone saw what he did yesterday. I mean, I'm more confident in Hegseth. So it's just, it's for him to mess up.
So the current Secretary of Defense is Lloyd Austin, and he's the one who, I think it was, he had a prostate cancer surgery without informing Biden last year that he was basically going to be going under the knife and anesthesia and all that. Like basically a very big surgery that any person in any cabinet would say, hey, by the way, Chief, I got this coming up, and totally.
He probably didn't even bother because Biden would have forgotten about it by the morning.
Yeah, Biden would have forgotten about it, is right. So look, I this is going to be a very big week with what we just recapped with Hegseth. I mean, today alone, right? Anita did a fantastic roundup on the DML News app regarding who we have just today alone. Pam Bondi. I think she's actually she started first this morning, and that's for Attorney General. You got Chris Wright for Secretary of Energy. Marco Rubio for Secretary of State is today. I mean, it's going to be a packed week with a lot of different cabinet members going before, these different committees before their confirmation hearings. In fact, we covered this extensively in the 47 report last night, which I just want to touch upon before we continue on with the show. Just a reminder, we are rolling out test trials of our newsletter this week. We did 2 so far this week alone, yesterday and Monday. We've been getting your feedback, which has been great, and I want to emphasize on that. The more feedback you give, the more we can, flesh out what's going to work best. So just keep your eye out on it, and our hope is that our finalized form is going to be ready to go following Trump's inauguration.
My microphone was off. I will add that yesterday the feedback box for some reason did not pop up. So today, if you have any suggestions written wise, down at the bottom there will be that I guess you'd call it poll with the stars, and then you can write what you like and what you don't. I know yesterday's version didn't have that, but the day before did.
Yeah.
So we fixed that. So if you have any feedback,
Yes, definitely.
just to
Yeah.
submit that.
In all sincerity, it's great when you vote, but with that feedback box, like Ryan said, even if it's just a sentence, or if you really want to go to town and give us feedback, we greatly appreciate it. So please vote if you get it tonight, as well as just filling in any suggestion. So that'll be for tonight's newsletter, and I'm sure tonight's newsletter will have updates as to how some of these hearings throughout the day go. So, speaking of some quick updates that we did discuss in the newsletter last night, Ryan, so I'm just going to kind of hit off some points here. Turns out Michelle Obama, our former First Lady, will not be attending Trump's inauguration. This comes after she skipped President Jimmy Carter's funeral last week. And as you can imagine, the speculation is pretty rampant from she just hates Trump. She's not going to show up, even though it should be your duty, when you are in a position of that nature. All the way to they think Barack and Michelle are having some rocky relationship issues. So I'm sure we won't know for a very long time. But I just find it interesting that Michelle is now skipping on a pretty big event that, it's the funeral. I mean, the funeral alone is a very big event where your country's leaders and their spouses are supposed to show. But 2 in a row is a little bit telling there.
I would say she probably achieves 2 things there. She sticks it to Trump, and then she gets her name in the headlines, which she loves attention.
She loves it when it's focused on them. That's for sure. But speaking of more Democrat women really showing their hand here, even Kamala Harris. It turns out Vice President-elect Vance, and his family were not formally invited by Kamala Harris and Doug Emhoff for basically a very formal introduction to where they're going to be moving into, because there's a residency for the VP, which traditionally that apparently is the case, and Kamala really made no effort there, but I wouldn't put it past her. Then another big little story here from yesterday. I want to hear your take on it too, Rye. Trump proposed on Truth Social that to counteract the IRS, which is the Internal Revenue Service, he would like to create the External Revenue Service as a way to basically improve on tariffs and revenue streams coming in from foreign sources.
Yeah, I mean, it's money. Like, I know what do they say? The money to Ukraine are loans.
Yes.
So we have loans with these countries, and we don't try and get it back from them.
Mhm.
So it's just in limbo, and we should have an agency that goes out and says, hey, you need to start paying this, and stop bending our knee and laying over. So I like that idea a lot.
Yes, I agree too. Hopefully, it's something that in those first 100 days we could see something of that nature. Now, another funny little tidbit, because I think you guys should know these names. Mark Zuckerberg, when he went on Joe Rogan last week and discussed about how Meta would receive some very antagonizing emails about how they should censor certain topics, such as taking down memes during the COVID era. I think a lot of people had questions. Well, who was really enacting it? Was it Joe Biden? Because we all know he's kind of asleep at the wheel. Was it Kamala Harris? Because we know she's just kind of just never at the wheel. Turns out, if you really want the names so that they're locked in your head in case they ever pop up, senior Biden advisor Andy Slavitt and White House digital director Rob Flaherty were the two prominent names to really enact censorship tactics when it came to keeping Meta and Facebook quiet. So just want to repeat those names in case you ever need them. Andy Slavitt and Rob Flaherty.
I'm sure there's a deep rabbit hole with those names.
Oh, totally.
I'm sure they're connected to a lot of things.
Time for a deeper rabbit hole here, Ryan. We have a clip from Tucker Carlson on one of his recent programs where he kind of maybe confirms what we've all been pretty suspicious of. And I think we'll get this confirmation from Trump himself once he's inaugurated, because he's kind of alluded to it. But Carlson here in a clip confirms that one of his intel guys, and I got to say, I feel like Carlson's definitely one of those people who is well connected because of the field that he's in, has informed him that it was the Chinese behind in the mysterious drones that were kind of making appearances for the last 2 months here in the U.S., especially on the eastern seaboard. He kind of explains a little bit here in the 30-second clip how the Chinese were doing it, allegedly. Right, let's play the clip.
An intel person told me that this person believed that they were in fact Chinese, and that a Chinese satellite went down, was visible to the naked eye. There were news stories about it. It evaporated, it burned up, and that this person told me that was taken down by the U.S. government. That was a command and control satellite for these drones. And the belief was the Chinese government was sending the following message: we're moving on Taiwan and maybe other things. You can't do anything about it.
So, Ryan, just real quick, is this a case of shocked but not surprised? Because, it's the Chinese. Who else would be capable of it other than us? And there's even been a little bit of tidbits dropped by Trump himself. Like, I don't know why they're not saying anything, meeting Biden, and then we all know who it is. But this seems to be more breadcrumb evidence that we're looking at the Chinese playing around. And I also want to hear your take on it, Rai. I mean, we have Ukraine and Russia. We have Israel and Hamas. I think something that would be very detrimental, especially stepping off on the wrong foot in terms of security and safety assurances, would be an imminent invasion of Taiwan by Chinese military forces, especially if that happened this year. I mean, it'd be unfathomable in terms of how this would be dealt with, but it's no secret that we rely heavily on Taiwan, especially when it comes to those semiconductor chips.
Yeah, I don't think we're surprised that it's China. I mean, China, the whole boogeyman thing with using Iran, I mean, it's just classic Chinese playbook. I mean, they're embedded in Hollywood. I remember the second movie, Red Dawn. It was supposed to be China invading, but they had to switch it to North Korea, because the Chinese told Hollywood, hey, you're not going to put us in that movie.
Right.
Obviously, you can translate that into media. So, the Chinese have their fingers in our media. So I'm sure they told, hey, blame it on Iran or whatever, like going, down that rabbit hole. But I'm not surprised. And I guess it makes sense because the drones did just stop out of nowhere. And if that satellite was controlling those drones, I mean, that would make sense for why the drones aren't in the sky anymore. I mean, the satellite's probably controlling the drones.
Right.
And then you probably have Chinese people in a warehouse somewhere with a desk, and they're probably controlling it from China. So without that, link through the satellite, they can't control those drones. So it makes sense as to why they just stopped out of nowhere. And I'm not surprised it's China.
Because some of the original speculation was that it would be a Chinese submarine off the coast. But I think to your point, I mean, the Biden administration has been so tolerable to some of these secret Chinese police stations and other hideouts in the U.S. Who's to say that maybe it really wasn't them, utilizing the satellite to ultimately, dictate where the drones were going to go.
They would have to use a satellite in order to connect to those drones. So
right.
And also to make it so, they probably took down the satellite because it's probably so encrypted. It's probably hard to, hack into it. So they're probably like, let's just take it out. Yeah, but China can just put another one up there and probably relink it. So, that, and Trump, I'm happy that Trump created Space Force. I believe Space Force was the one that took out the satellite. So, props to Trump for doing that.
Yes. Look, I think a very big goal for Trump is going to have to be, let's get that energy and manufacturing self-independence again, because uh, it's very tiresome to see how tied up we get in some of these wars, such as with Ukraine, because maybe there's some biolabs that we don't want to be necessarily direct about, or even Israel with like the idea it's always Middle East security, and then Taiwan. Yes, we I think it's what 90% or close to with um, semiconductor inventory in terms of like how much we use comes from Taiwan, and Taiwan is a very good example of a country with a foundational democracy that could work, especially in a region where, when you look at China, that's not so much the case. So, this idea that we may now need to get dragged in because if they decide to invade this year because of our vested interests, it's going to have to be one or two ways. We either do get dragged in or we give it up. But then what's going to be the ramifications of that when we can't get our direct access to those semiconductors? So,
Yeah, and with Taiwan, it's funny. I have a buddy who has a lot of friends in Taiwan who are Taiwanese.
yeah,
And he said that it's kind of split in half. Like some see themselves as Chinese,
right.
and then the other half doesn't.
hmm
So I don't know what an invasion of Taiwan would look like when he's telling me how he knows these people, and some of them just see them as like Chinese, like see
Right,
them as part of China, and then the other half don't. So
right,
and you could translate that into being a Republican and Democrat. So
right.
I don't know how that would look if half the country is not pro being Taiwan independence, and you can't really believe the media because they're going to create a narrative around Taiwan. So
Exactly.
yeah, so I've always thought about that, but I hope they don't invade because that's going to put us in
You'd be telling.
a Cuban Missile Crisis
Some
situation.
people could even, if anyone watching would be interested, there are even some training videos online of like how Taiwanese citizens would react if they were invaded by Chinese forces. It's very interesting you say that because I think it could be a mix of if they were invaded, half of them would be very willingly like, hey, we want to be with you. But I think the other half, I would only imagine that there would have to be some form of resistance to it because the whole background of them wanting to split was because of their honestly ultimate hatred of how the Chinese were, well, the Chinese government at the time was transforming the nation into a communist state. So, well, either way, I mean, I would like to see it where if this were to happen, at least Trump is in the Oval Office and not Joe Biden, because it would be even a little bit more um, cumbersome, but or fearsome. But there's no doubt that with the U.S. right now, because of Biden, the infiltration that we have had from Chinese agents and nationals is awful. Speaking of infiltration, this is our last story here, and we have a little B-roll video for it. This might be the classic case of when you give a mouse a cookie, then they want a glass of milk, and then they want to stay in your house and never leave. There's a viral story going about right now, and Ryan, if you want, you could start playing the video over me. There's this Paris theater that has a very leftist politics, and they invited 250 migrants, primarily from Central Africa, like in the Congo, to stay at their theater during the holidays as like a welcoming, trying to be very gracious and compatible, like come stay the weekend. Well, that was 5 weeks ago, and these migrants have refused to leave. In fact, they are now protesting, saying they have the right to housing and living and eating and everything you can think of at this particular theater. As a result, the theater has not been able to book any events, and it's now on the verge of bankruptcy because it can't get rid of these migrants. I mean, Ryan, sometimes the stories almost feel like they write themselves. I mean,
Yeah, they're kind
are
of
we
like ants.
surprised?
It's kind of like ants. Like like one ant will come to your house,
Yes.
and then it'll go back and get all of its other
Oh,
ants.
it's a little army.
It's
Yes.
kind of like ants. You just if you let one in or you give one too much, the
Yeah.
rest are gonna come.
You're not wrong because truthfully, it's 250 that started. It's now like breaching to 350. So they had those 250 initially that were staying there, and then their family members and friends started piling in. And as of right, I mean, you see it in the video. They're protesting on the steps. So a gracious and probably well-meaning move from this liberal Paris theater ended up backfiring on them, and now they're probably going to go out of business because the migrants won't leave. Well, maybe it just turned itself, I guess, into a French equivalent to Section 8 housing because how do you feel bad? I'm sorry, but I just don't. Well, that's it for our stories today. I thank you guys for being with us. We will have a Life After 50 episode premiering this Friday, so watch out for that. That will be a very fantastic episode that we think you guys will love. And like I mentioned earlier, our newsletter will be coming out tonight, our third test trial one, our beta version. And like we said, if you could please vote on it and give feedback, it means a lot to us. As for today's teamed email blessing, I would like to give it to Linda Hannon, and I hope you all have a fantastic Wednesday. We'll see you tomorrow.
Get the Dennis Michael Lynch podcast every day by subscribing on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and download the DMail News app from the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store for breaking news, merchandise, films, exclusive content, and teamed email.